Hello, my name is Carolina Quiroga and I am a storyteller, author, and podcaster. And you can find more about my storytelling career and my new video program, Story Tips, at my website, carolinastoryteller.com. Also, you can listen to my bilingual podcast, Tres Cuentos, dedicated to the traditional literary and historical narratives of Latin America. And you can listen to it in whichever podcast app you use to listen to your favorite podcasts. And of course, you can also visit our website, trescuentos.com. All the episodes are right there. Today, the Grand Rapids Public Library entrusted me with the mission of telling you some wonderful Mayan stories. But before I delight you with some of my favorite tales, how about I give you a bit of background and context on the Mayan culture. My hope is that in this way, you will be able to enjoy and understand the stories much better. Our first story has to do with the famous Mesoamerican ball game, the twin brothers and the underworld lords. So let us begin with the ball game. The ball game possibly began 3,500 years ago. The Mesoamerican players were the first to play with a rubber ball. What made the rubber ball so fascinating to the first Spanish people was that it bounced. That, along with the concept of team play, is what made the New World game unique. Granted, at first, many Spanish men thought that the bouncing quality of the ball was some sort of magic or the work of the devil. Why? Because until then, the rubber ball was unknown in Europe and Asia. They had been using wooden or leather spheres. So, of course, they were like, what? Interestingly, the ball game was not exclusive to Mesoamerica. The first Spaniards reported witnessing the ball game being played in the islands of the Caribbean. Then, in 1519, they saw the game in the great Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. And from then, lively rubber balls began to replace the wood and leather European counterparts. The Olmec, Mesoamerica's first great civilization. They had teams, rubber balls, standardized protective equipment, religious rituals around the game, and the ball court. And from there, the game became so popular that it spread to the rest of Mesoamerica, even to the American Southwest and the Caribbean islands. The game was so popular that as of today, more than 1,500 ball courts have been found in Mesoamerica. The precise origin of the ritual ball game is lost. Still, figurines of female ball players' presence suggest that it began as a game played by ordinary people and evolved into a religious ceremony controlled by rulers. Most of its meaning is still under speculation. Yet, here are some theories. The ball and its movement symbolize the movement of heavenly bodies in the sky. The game then was a battle of the sun against the moon and the stars. In this way, the opposing teams represented the opposing forces of day and night, good and evil, life and death. For the Olmec and the Maya, the ball game was a religious activity that pleased the gods and promoted new life and agricultural fertility. Furthermore, it was a means of settling territorial or ethnic disputes, thus an allegory for warfare. It is possible that to favor the rains during the dry season, war and the ball game were practiced. The ball game served to promote blood offerings because at the end of the game, death was accomplished. From the pre-Hispanic perspective, taking a life was necessary to perpetuate life. The ball game offered the debated contender in war and conquest the opportunity of being sacrificed with honor. Such actions replicated the deeds of the hero twins who defeated death in the Quiche Maya epic, the Popol Vuh. Well, these places were also used for theatrical events. For the Maya in particular, the ball court was also an entrance to the underworld, the dark region where the hero twins were called to play the ball game against the Lords of Death. The story was dramatically acted out on the courts by the Maya kings, dressed as ball players against captives taken in battle and weakened physically in preparation for the staged contest against the royal protagonists. Depending on the location where the game was played, the ball varied in size. For instance, in central Mexico, the ball used by the Aztecs was about softball size, whereas in southern Mesoamerica, it was larger, about the size of a beach ball. The stakes of the game were high because that ball was heavy and dangerous. Blows from the heavy rubber ball could leave a player severely injured or even dead. Still, the dangers paled in comparison to the glory enjoyed by the greatest heroic athletes, just as it is today. No Maya rubber balls have survived archaeologically, but modern balls of northern Mexico and Olmec balls provide evidence for a ball more than 12 inches in diameter or smaller. However, the representation of human skulls in the ball suggests that the Maya made hollow balls by placing skulls in the center, which lightens them and improves their bounce. At least among the Maya, despite the size of Maya courts, evidence show that each team had only 2 players. The contestants used their hands only to pull the ball in play and then otherwise ricocheted the ball off the walls using upper arms, hips, and thighs. Regarding the name, well, since it was played in many different places and everyone spoke a different language, there are many names. Yet, one that I found so interesting was Pok Tak Pok. The word resembles the sounds that the rubber ball makes when it bounces. Pok Tak Pok. Thanks to the figurines found in different excavation sites, we know that the contestants wore various combinations of attire and gear. These included yokes, hachas, knee and elbow pads, armbands, helmets, and heavy gloves. And because most of the potent strokes emanated from the hips, players wore their most extensive padding in the middle of the body, usually wrapped around waist yokes. These yokes were probably made of wood, but the Maya pattern is generally represented as quilted, perhaps cotton cloth filled with unspun cotton or kapok, the silky product of the ceiba tree. The Lords of Xibalba. And there were several of them. Some of the most well-known are Chiquiripat and Cuchimaquic, who made people vomit blood, Ajalpuj and a Halkana, who made welts rise up on the skin of people. Chamiyapak and Chamiyahom, who made people lose weight. A Halmes and a Haltokop, who caused heart attacks and sudden death. Kik-Ishik and Patan, who caused accidents on the roadways. But the major ones were Vukuv Kame and Hun Kame, the same two death lords that play as antagonists in the novel Gods of Jade and Shadow, written by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Let us begin our journey through the world of the Maya. The story says that before the legendary twin brothers that defeated the Lords of Xibalba, there were two other brothers, also twins, and their names were Hunahpu and Hunahpu. I will briefly recount what happened to them. Hunahpu and Hunahpu spent their days playing the great ball game. One day, the lords of the underworld, Hun Kame and Vukup Kame, woke up upset from a nap. They noticed that someone upstairs was making much noise. Even worse, the strangers were playing the ball game for which the lords of death were very well known. The two lords, Hun and Vukup Kame, called the other lords of the underworld and counseled about what to do with such disrespect. In the end, they all concluded to lure the twin brothers into a trap and punish them. The owls were sent out to extend the brothers Hunahpu and Hunahpu an invitation to bring their equipment, ball, and gear and play against the lords of the underworld. Hunahpu and Hunahpu accepted the invitation and went down a very steep ladder to the underworld. They crossed several underground rivers until they reached a crossroads, where they needed to choose wisely. Each road was a different color: red, black, white, and yellow. They looked at each direction, and finally they chose the black path, and it was the right one. They arrived at the hall where the brothers were supposed to meet the lords of the underworld. But in their place, they were met by two wooden puppets. Hunahpu and Hunahpu did not realize the trap they were walking in. Humbly the brothers bowed to the wooden dolls and said, "Greetings, Hun Kame and Vukup Kame." Soon the brothers heard a sarcastic laugh. Wah-ha-ha-ha-ha! To the lords of death, the twin brothers clearly couldn't tell the difference between a god and a wooden image. Indeed, for that, the brothers lost some valuable points because the lords of the underworld were taking notes. Immediately from the shadows came out the real lords who invited the brothers to sit down. Unfortunately, the twins were pranked again. This time they fell for the old trick, the hot bench made of hot stones for cooking. When the brothers went to sit down, ow! Ow, they burnt their butts so bad. And the lords of the underworld again had a good laugh. Next, the brothers found themselves in the dark house. They each were given an ocote torch and a cigar and told, "Light the torch and your cigar, but tomorrow you will have to return them whole. Do not let the torch and cigar burn up." Yet, that was not possible. I mean, that place was so dark and cold, the brothers needed light and warmth. In the morning, as expected, the lords of the underworld found the brothers had failed. The evidence? The torch and cigar were burned. Well, that was the end of those twin brothers. Both were killed, beheaded, to be more specific. Hunahpu's head was placed on a stake on the branch of a tree that had never borne fruit. Curiously, as soon as the head was put on the tree, round calabashes sprouted all over the branches. Now the head could not be distinguished from the other fruit. Therefore, a forbidden order was dictated. No one under no circumstances could come near the tree. Nonetheless, you know how most stories go after a warning or a prohibition or an order to stay at home. The princess Ixchel, daughter of one of the underworld lords, could not help herself. And upon hearing the story of the forbidden fruit tree, she went to check it out. And when she went to touch one of the fruits that kind of looked like a skull, she felt the fruit skull spitting into her hand. She looked down, but the saliva evaporated. Then she heard a voice saying, "My offspring is in the spit. Go back up to the earth and you will not die. Trust in my word." The girl got pregnant. And have you guessed who her future sons were? Right, the legendary twin brothers of the Popol Vuh. And here is their story. The twin brothers. In an old book called El Popol Vuh, there is a story about two brothers who dared to play the ancient ball game Pock Tack Pock against the Lords of Xibalba, the Lords of the underworld. The brothers were Hunahpu and Xbalanque, who were the sons and nephews of other two brothers who had lost their heads after meeting the cheating Lords of Xibalba. So, when the two brothers found out about the truth of what had happened to their predecessors, they decided that they wanted justice. In the act of defiance, the twins began playing Pock Tack Pock everywhere. And soon, their reputation had reached all places and ears, including the underworld. History was repeating itself, and we will see if there is a better ending for this. One day, the Lords of Xibalba heard the 8-pound ball used to play Pock Tack Pock bouncing on the surface of the earth. And so they asked themselves, Who dares to play our game? Who dares to challenge us? Immediately, the Lords of Xibalba sent an invitation upstairs to the brothers to come and play. The invitation was carried by the owls, who delivered the message to the boys' grandmother, who knew that there was no other choice. The twins had to journey to the underworld. So she asked Alouse to carry the invitation to the brothers who were away playing. The louse flew off, but on her way she ran into a toad, who offered her a ride in her belly. After a while, the toad ran into Saquilas, the snake, who knew the urgency of the situation and offered her a ride, guess where? In her belly as well. A while later, a sparrowhawk saw the snake, and after she found out about the pressing matter, she offered the snake a fast ride inside her belly too. At last, the sparrowhawk made it to where the twins were playing. There, the bird spat up a huge snake, which in turn spat out a toad. And this one did the same thing with the louse, who at last was able to deliver the message. The brothers accepted the invitation and began to head towards the bowels of the earth. through narrow and dimmed corridors, down the black road, until they reached the first chamber with wooden statues. Hunahpu and Xbalanque, smelling something rotten about the scene, sent their friend Chac, the Mosquito. His mission was to scout ahead, invite the lords one by one, and inform back which ones were the real lords and what their names were. One after the other, Chac went on biting. The first two he bit did not say a thing, because those were the wooden statues, the puppets. So the Mosquito carried on biting, and as he did, each lord cried, "Ouch!" And then the lord sitting next would say, "What has bitten you, Vukup Kame?" And that is how Chac the Mosquito found out the lords' names. When at last Hunahpu and Xbalanque came to the hall where the lords awaited, the brothers crossed their hands behind their back, looked up and down, and did not say a thing to the first two lords, the wooden puppets. Next, they looked at each of the other lords and greeted them by their names. And so they passed the first test, because they proved to the Lords of Xibalba that they could tell the difference between a god and a wooden image. If only they had known that it was Chac the Mosquito, the one who revealed their true nature. And for doing the twins such a great service, Chac the Mosquito was awarded with the fanciful delight of biting any human whenever he wants. After exchanging greetings, the Lords of Xibalba invited the brothers to sit down. They wanted to discuss the rules of the game they were about to play, such as what kind of ball they were going to use, the one that the brothers brought, or the one they use in the underworld that is heavier than a normal one. Well, Hunahpu and Xbalanque did not fall for the old hot stone bench trick. They were wiser than their predecessors, and their butts remained intact. Oh, the Lords of Xibalba were disappointed. Had the brothers fallen for the hot stone bench trick, they would have not been able to play very well. Because you see, Pock Tack Pock is the predecessor of basketball and soccer. Still, unlike basketball that is played with your hands and soccer that is played with your feet, Pock Tack Pock is played with your, you already know this, what is it? Thighs, knees, hips, and butts. So now you know why the Lords of Xibalba wanted to burn the butts of these guys. Yet, the lords were unable to pull that prank off. Yet, before there were more talks about the game, the boys were taken to the dark house and given the same test that was the undoing of their predecessors. But the boys knew how to outsmart this one too. They did not light the torch, neither the cigar. Instead, the brothers put macaw tail feathers on the tips of the ocote. Thus they appeared red and ablaze in the darkness. They put fireflies at the end of the cigars, so it seemed as if they were smoking them. In the morning, they returned the cigars and the ocote torches whole, intact. Oh, this ingenious act much angered the Lords of Xibalba. So, at last, they went to play a dangerous match. Well, as you heard me saying before, Pock Tack Pock gets as intense as basketball and soccer. There were lots of thighs here, there, knees here and there, hips here and there, butts here and there. Yet, someone had to win. In Xibalba, there are no ties. There are only winners and losers. Hunahpu and Xbalanque, the brothers, lost. Oh, the Lords of Xibalba were delighted. Now the losers had to do offerings to the victors. Hunahpu and Xbalanque were locked in the House of Knives, the second house of torture in Xibalba. Inside such a horrible place, there was a big garden where the boys had to work on their next test. They were told that they had only until dawn to complete a task or risk being executed in the act. The brothers had to fill 4 baskets with the flower petals of the chipilín that grows only in Xibalba. The first basket needed to be filled with red petals, the second one white petals, the third yellow, and the last black petals. Sounds easy, right? But it was not meant to be. First, the knives inside the house tried to cut the boys, but Hunahpu and Xbalanque told the knives, "You will only be permitted to cut animals." And the blades did not move. However, that was not the end of it. You see, the garden was guarded by the night birds called boys, who were given the mission of not letting the brothers get to the flowers. So every time Hunahpu or Xbalanque tried to come close to the chipilíns, the puhuis would attack them everywhere with their beaks. Ow, ow, ow! Oh, Hunahpu and Xbalanque needed to think a different strategy. And so they remembered their friends, the sompopos, the leaf-cutter ants. Hunahpu and Xbalanque called, "Sompopos, sompopos!" And the leaf-cutter ants came swarming into the garden, cutting all the petals of all the flowers and carrying them back in order to the 4 baskets. And to those boys, those night birds that tried to stop what was going on, well, those birds, ouch, ouch, were nibbled in their tails and in their, what was this? Wings. The next morning, when the Lords of Xibalba came into the garden, completely convinced that these losers had failed and were going to face the same fate as their father and uncle, well, they were in distraught. The baskets were full of petals. Ooh, the lords were furious at the puhuis, the night birds, for failing in their mission. So the Lords of Xibalba tore open their beaks. And that is why the puhuis have their mouths split. And that is how the sompopos came that day to help the brothers, as many other animals had in this ordeal. Now, if you think this is the end of the story, it is not. Hunahpu and Xbalanque performed many more feats. They passed more tests in different houses of torture, more trials that were far more difficult, dangerous, and challenging than the last one. Yes, they played many more games of pock, tack, pock against the Lords of Xibalba, the Lords of the underworld. To be honest, the brothers lost most of the games. Still, they won the last one, the most important one. But that is an exceptionally long and old story for another day when we recount other glories. But I'll give you a hint. When the brothers finally defeated the Lords of Xibalba after pulling a very ingenious magic trick, they told those treasonous lords, "From now on, you will no longer control the ball game. Your domain will be the sinners, the corrupt, the sad, the wretched, and the depraved. You will not be able to take advantage of people, not so easily, not again." And that is why Xibalba became the place of some devious deaf people, and how the ball game that spread across Mesoamerica was no longer a privilege of those who lived in the underworld. And that, my friends, is the end for now. I hope you enjoyed the story. Take a break or grab some popcorn, because the next story is my favorite. Perhaps some of you already know that it is nearly impossible to know it all about the Maya. Much of their knowledge and stories were lost even before the arrival of the Spaniards. What we know about them comes from the works of chroniclers, field researchers, and the Maya groups that survived to this day. It is risky to try to generalize them under the same umbrella, the same Maya culture, because there are many Mayan groups that do not necessarily speak the same language, share the same beliefs, or the same stories. The Popol Vuh actually reveals the sacred beliefs of the Quiche Maya, but does not necessarily mean that the other Maya groups share the exact same sacred stories. Before we dive into our next narrative, I will share a little bit of context on the characters that are part of our narration. The Yucatecos, Mopanis, Lacandones, Chortis, Quechis, and Cachiqueles believed that the sun was the moon's husband. However, the book Popol Vuh tells a different account. Specifically, in the sacred book of the Quiche, the twin brothers become the sun and the moon after defeating the underworld's lords. This might sound like a contradiction to you. We know that the twin brothers were boys. We just heard the story, but in most of the Mayan culture, the moon is considered female. So there is a sort of mystery there. Here is another mystery. Depending on the Maya group that refers to the celestial beings, the sun will have a different name. He is known as Ki, which means day or sun, Akin, Lord Sun, Kinish Ahau, the face of the sun, Balanque, Jaguar Sun, Hunahpu, only fire, and even Itzamná, inventor of writing. On the other hand, there seems to be a general agreement that the sun was not a creator type of deity. On the contrary, he is the creator's offspring. Besides, like many Mayan gods, the sun has a dual nature. He is the young man that elopes with the moon, runaways. And he is also the elder of the skies, Lord of knowledge. In the past, the sun was more feared than loved. In the codices, his aspect was malign and was identified with droughts and the bad weather. Last, since the sun would go away every night, many Maya believed that he was going to the underworld. And from there came the idea that the sun was also a Lord of Xibalba, because in some inscriptions his symbol has appeared next to those of the lords of the underworld. It was believed among the Mayas of the Yucatan Peninsula, the Maya Tezcales and the Canjobales, that the eclipses are due to a marital fight between the sun and the moon. To some, the sun scolds his wife for being a gossiper. To others, the eclipse is caused by jaguars or ants or demons. Thus, when an eclipse happens across the Mayan lands, people make lots of noises to distract the aggressor's attention and save the moon. It is also believed that the moon is less bright than the sun because the solar disk took out one of her eyes, so she would not shine like him. Oof. Others say that she lost one eye after fighting against the sun. In most versions of the moon's drama, the sun becomes jealous of her friendship with other celestial beings and starts fighting her, and in some cases, beats her up. Very well, let's move on to the protagonist of our next story, the moon. The moon goddess also has different names depending on the Maya region. For the Mayas of Chiapas and the lowlands, the celestial body we know as the moon is known as U or U. In Quechua, she is Po. In Quiche, Cachiquel, and Sutujil, she is Ik. And in Ixchel and Uspanteca, she is Ish. In our story, she is known as Ixchel, Lady Rainbow. For the most part, the moon is considered our mother, grandmother, lady, and saint mother. In some places, she is known as the moon goddess, but in others, she was the goddess of birds and conceiving. Her idol was typically placed under the bed of the woman who was given birth. Also, she was the patron of sickness. And to the Cachiqueles of Panajachel, she is the owner of Lake Atitlán, where she has her palace under the waters. However, most Mayas agree that the moon goddess is the patron of weaving because she was the first woman who wove when she caught the sun's attention. The Yucatec gods of rain. They seem to receive more offerings than any other deity in the region, even more prayers. Their devotion is very ancient, and their symbols can be found in classic monuments and codices. They are also known as gods of maize crops. They are said to follow the 4 directions and embody the colors of the world: east, red; north, white; west, black; south, yellow. There are 4 major Chacs and many minor ones. Yet, in our story, we will only hear about one, the chief of other Chacs. His name is Kunku Chac, kind god. Although in this story, he is showing a quite different side of him. In the codices, Chac has an axe, just as his Mexican cousin Tlaloc. In some cases, the Chacs found in the codices are holding burning torches, signifying the heat of droughts, because the Chacs can send or withhold the rain. Finally, I must warn you that there are several versions of Ixchel's story, the moon's story. So the following is just one of them. Lady Rainbow, Ixchel, is the principal moon goddess of Mayan lore in Campeche, Yucatan, and Guatemala. Among her many forms are the single virgin, the enchanting seductress with multiple lovers, the nurturing mother of all life, and the grandmother healer. The following episode is part of a more extended tale told to Erika Helmmead in 1975 by 2 Cachiquel brothers, Ateca and Alena. And you can find this beautiful story in her book, The Moon in the Well, published by Open Court Publishing Company. Also, you can find the story in my podcast, Tres Cuentos, in English and in Spanish. Long time ago, in the land of the wandering Jaguar, the sacred deer, the magnificent Quetzal bird, the ants who conquer, and the brave butterflies. Beneath the Jade Mountain, and alongside the turquoise sea. In the land of the Maya people, the moon was said to be the most beautiful of all the heavenly bodies. People would spend hours during clear nights just looking at Ixchel, the moon. But Ixchel, well, she had a busy schedule. She was in charge of watching over the tides of the ocean, steadily guiding them in and out. No one's timing was more reliable. She would also help sway over the pulse of life, women, fertile cycle, and agriculture. And she would guide midwives, healers, and weavers. But her favorite pastime was traversing the cosmic streams, paddling in her canoe, and admiring the stars. Sometimes she would shine boldly, and other times she would partially wrap herself beneath her silken shawl, so no one would get to see not even a sliver of her luminous cheek. And then, in silence, she would glide across the Milky Way. In the meantime, the sun was secretly in love with Ixchel. Oh, he would watch her as much as he could. He would strain his ray lights trying to catch a glimpse of her. And sometimes she would slightly open her silken shawl so he would get to see her earlobe. And when he was lucky, he would get to see her shoulder. Oh, the harder he looked at her, the brighter she shone. And this watching and waiting and shining and flirting went on for eons, so the Maya say. In the land of the Maya, there are 2 seasons: the calm season and the storm season. And the storms were created by the storm maker, Chac. And Chac, well, he would get really bored during the calm season. Ugh. And you know what happens when the gods get bored, right? They tend to gossip. And he was not the exception. So one day, feeling like stirring things up, Chac went to the moon's palace while Ixchel was away to visit her grandfather. And so he said, "Ay, grandfather, abuelo, abuelito, you're so tiny, I almost didn't see you right there. Ay, abuelo, grandfather. You know that I see things everywhere. And just the other day I saw a glint in the sun's eyes for Ixchel." Oh! Well, to that grandfather said, "Hey, Chac, the truth is that I have not seen anything different. Not really, no. Well, to me, just to me, not that everybody's talking about this yet, but to me, it just seems as if the sun ray lights are like arrows of desire for Ixchel." Oh! After Chac left, grandfather could not get that thought out of his mind. This was unthinkable these two could not come together. Ixchel's domains was of the night, midwives and healers, while the sun's domains was of the day and nourishing the crops. If these two were gonna come together, and at this point you know what that is. What is it? An eclipse, yes. Well, if that would happen, floods and darkness would come upon the earth. Oh, no, no, no. That should not happen. Meanwhile, Chac was bored to death. And this time, he felt like paying another visit to another fellow that lived on top of the Jade Mountain, Vulture. And so Chac said, "You know, Mr. Vulture, that I hear things everywhere. And just the other day I heard that whoever gets to marry Ixchel will become the king of the skies." Well, after Chac left, Vulture could not get that thought out of his mind. I mean, in those times, Vulture was not yet eating rotten and dead meat. He was just eating, rotten vegetables and well-mature fruits. But either way, both things not exactly makes him a high-class bird, more so a low-class bird. And the whole thought of becoming the king of the skies was certainly an intriguing thought. Was Vulture. He was a meek fellow, but he was quite persistent. After that, every morning before dawn, he began to fly up the skies to visit Ixchel and say something like, "Jewel of the skies, how radiantly you glowed through the clouds last night." Well, of course, these visits did not pass unseen to the sun, who grew really jealous. Well, the calm season was nearly over, and this time Chac felt like speeding things up. And so he went back to the moon's palace while Ixchel was away to visit Abuelo, grandfather. And so Chac said, "Ay, Abuelo, you're so tiny. I almost didn't see you right there. Ay, Abuelo, I bring stressful news. Everybody is talking, and they are saying that Vulture is planning to elope, run away with Ixchel, and to prevent that, the sun is trying to kidnap her. But I'm sure you're well aware of the situation, right?" The truth is that Abuelo, grandfather, didn't know anything about it. But since he wanted to pretend that he knew everything, he said, "Of course, Chac, of course. I am well aware of the situation. Of course, I know that. I saw it in the news. But I am still deciding what to do. What to do." Well, you know I like to brainstorm. And I've been steering some wonderful ideas. Then Chac went on telling grandfather Abuelo what he had been thinking, more so what he had been scheming. In the end, Abuelo grandfather thanked Chac and encouraged him to be brave on that heroic mission. Well, if the rumors of this love triangle were true or not, we really don't know, because that happened long time ago. But what we know is that vulture and the sun moved towards Ixchel that dawn, as it had been their habit. But what was special about that day? Chac, the rain god, was poised upon the sea, ready to release the biggest storm ever seen. First, he brought down the clouds. Second, he sent his fierce winds that went everywhere and told everybody that it was about time to find shelter. Third, came the thunder clouds that came with so much violence that they nearly jolted the morning star, Venus, out of his place in the skies. But the worst was about to be unleashed. Chac had ready his axes, and he began to toss the axes against the clouds. And when the axes were hitting the clouds, they were creating lightning bolts, and the lightning bolts began to strike the earth here and there, here and there. One of those lightning bolts struck Ixchel, and she fell from the skies and splash, sank into the waters of the ocean. And fearing for her life, she changed herself into a crab, and she let herself go, thinking that she was going to be just fine. But she was wrong. Chac was so blinded by his own rage that the lightning bolts began to pierce the waters of the ocean, striking her here and there, here and there. Until Chac grew bored and calm came back. Ixchel's lifeless body was found floating in the waters of the ocean next to her canoe. To rescue the pieces of her lifeless body came crossing the seas, the deserts, the forests, the mountains, 400 dragonflies. And gently they picked up her body and placed her in her canoe. Then they lifted up her canoe and brought it back to the moon's palace, to her grandfather, to Abuelo. ¡Ay, mi niña! ¡Mi niña! Abuelo, grandfather, couldn't believe it. If only he hadn't listened to Chac. For 13 days and 13 nights, the 400 dragonflies covered Ixchel and her canoe as if her canoe was her coffin. And they hummed, and they hummed. On the 13th night, grandfather asked the dragonflies if they could take her to the cenotes, the entrances of the underworld, because it was about time to say goodbye. And in that moment, the 400 dragonflies elevated themselves in the air and flew away. Ay, 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 mi niña, mi niña. Ay, mi niña, mi niña. Mi niño! But to grandfather's surprise, Ixchel rose up full of life. All those days and nights that the dragonflies had been humming, they were not grieving for her. They were not giving her a farewell. They were filling her up with their life force. Ixchel rose up and resumed her place in the skies as the moon goddess of the Maya. As for what happened to Chac and Vulture, well, those are two different stories. But the Quiche Maya that tell this story will tell you too. Do not underestimate the power of a dragonfly. One is steadfast and strong, but 400, we all together can make miracles happen, especially during these very strange times. Very well, dear friends, I hope you enjoyed the stories. And remember that you can visit my website, carolinastoryteller.com. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube as Carolina Storyteller. And you can support my mission of contributing to the understanding and appreciation of all Latin American stories and cultures by buying my book, The Hungry Goddess and the 5 Sons, Aztec Myths with a Twist, illustrated in the same way the Aztec used to write their pictographic books. And you can get this wonderful book at my website. And if you want to know more about Latin American stories, histories, and narratives, listen to my podcast, Tres Cuentos. You can visit the website and you can find all the episodes in English and Spanish. And you can subscribe to the program in iTunes or in whichever podcast app you use to listen to your favorite podcasts. Very well, until the next cuento or story. Adiós, adiós.